The first time the stairwell spoke, it chose a number. 5, it said, like air squeezed through teeth, while Lena's sneaker hovered over the next step. She froze, the grocery bag's plastic cutting into her fingers, the bulbs inside clinking like small glass bones. The apartment building was a stack of tired breathing, pipes ticking, wind shivering the old windows. But this was a voice pressed into concrete. She looked up the narrow shaft. Nothing. A rectangle of dim skylight 3 floors above. The handrail wore a greasy sheen from decades of hands, and the steps had that dip in the center. Old stairs get from repeated surrender. "Hello?" she called, feeling stupid. It wasn't late, but the hallway light had the yellowed tone of old photographs, and the stairwell trapped every sound like a jar. 5, the stairwell repeated, less like a word than a choice delivered. She ran the numbers. 5th floor? There wasn't one. This building climbed to 4 and stopped with a sulking, tar-papered roof. 5 minutes? 5 days? 5 what? Her phone had no signal, as usual inside the core of the place. She balanced the bag on her hip and took the step. The metal spine of the staircase vibrated faintly, like a tuning fork struck in another room. She climbed, pulse sinking to a counting that hadn't started yet, but already owned her breath. On the landing, the smell changed, less mildew, more copper. She brushed the wall with her knuckles. They came away with a fine, rust-red powder. Maintenance? She said to no one, and to the idea that the building had someone left to care. A door creaked on a floor above. Not hers. Not anyone's, she recognized. She wasn't the kind to scare easy, not after the year she'd had, but the stairwell had planted a seed. By the time she reached her floor, the bulbs had stopped clinking. The bag was suddenly lighter. Inside her apartment, she set the groceries down, locked both locks, and listened. Pipes, wind, a neighbor's laugh through 2 thin walls, and, underneath, the thought that wouldn't settle. If the stairwell had started at 5, what happened when it reached 1? Something in the hall answered her thought with a soft, eager change in pressure, as if the building inhaled. Somewhere deep in the spine of steps, a voice rehearsed the next number. At 2:13 a.m., Lena woke to footsteps pacing above her that shouldn't exist. No one lived on a 5th floor. The roof was just tar and a cricket of a vent fan. The steps weren't heavy, though. They were deliberate, as if practicing balance. Between passes, a whisper scraped like a fingernail along corrugated cardboard. 4. Lena turned on the bedside lamp. The bulb hummed. She texted her ex out of muscle memory. "We ever hear weird stuff?" Then deleted it. She had left to get away, from settling, from rooms that decided who she was. Now the building was deciding who she'd be when the counting ended. She opened her door. Hallway. Vacant. Carpet flattened by old traffic. The exit sign at the stairwell bled green. She stepped in. The air was cooler, and the metal rail sweated condensation. Somewhere far below, a door latch twitched. "Hello?" She tried again, the word landing with no echo, as if the place had learned her voice and absorbed it. 4, the stairwell said, so close to her ear she flinched. The voice had no direction. It was simply in the structure, a tone tuned into steel. 4, what? Lena asked. Floors? Days? People? Silence. Then, almost polite, one new sound. The faint ring of a phone that wasn't ringing anywhere. It was the old landline chime, soft, patient, as if the building remembered being young. Lena retreated to her apartment and pulled the panel from her breaker box. No loose wires. She checked the hallway phone jack they'd capped when she moved in. Dead. She pressed her ear to the wall and heard oceans of tiny clicks, the chatter of relays that no longer existed. The building had been a switchboard once, she remembered the landlord saying, a knot of lines and voices. You could call the city through it, he'd bragged. It remembered every conversation. Lena went back to bed and didn't sleep. She listened to the phantom steps practicing above the roofline, pacing a room that wasn't there, rehearsing the right weight to put on each number. When morning finally peeled the darkness away, the stairwell exhaled like someone who'd held their breath all night and whispered, almost fondly, 4. On the third day, the postcards arrived. No postage, no writing on the back, just 4 photographs printed in the faded palette of the 70s. The same narrow stairwell Lena knew, but dressed differently. Brighter paint, intact plaster, a woman halfway up, frozen in motion, her head turned as if someone had called her name. The second card showed the landing with a janitor's mop and a wet floor sign. The third was angled down from a higher floor than this building possessed. The fourth was a close-up of the brass 3, screwed into the landing wall, polished by countless hands. Lena flipped them over again and again, as if words might develop under heat. Nothing. The downstairs mailboxes didn't have her apartment number on them. They had appeared under her door like a cat's gift. She carried the postcards into the stairwell and matched angles. Here, the scratch in the paint. There, the chip in the step. She stood where the woman had stood in the first photograph, feeling foolish, then ridiculous, then suddenly very not alone. A cold channel of air slid down the back of her neck, pooling at the collarbone, and the rail trembled under her fingers. 3, the stairwell said, warmly now. Intimate. The kind of voice a house uses when it decides you live in it. Who are you counting for? Lena whispered. A shadow, thin as unspooled tape, moved across the top landing where the roof should have been. In the corner, behind a rusting standpipe, something glinted, a brass 3. But the building's landings were numbered by floor, and this level should have worn a 2. The screw heads were new. Stop, Lena said, but the stairwell only offered a new sound, layered beneath the old phone ring, the dry click-click of a switch being thrown and thrown until it stuck, the way you'd try to connect a call that wouldn't go through. She remembered her grandmother's stories about party lines, about listening in, about voices caught on wires like rain on a clothesline. The postcards were a message, not from a ghost, exactly, from a system stubbornly refusing to admit it had been taken offline. When she went back inside, the brass numbers on her apartment door were wrong. She lived in 3B. Tonight, the B hung by one nail, rotated 90 degrees into a bruised, crooked 3. The storm came quick, the kind that turns late afternoon to dusk all at once. Rain shouldered the city. Gutters took up smoking. Lena watched the hallway light strobe with each thunderclap, and the stairwell felt charged, receptive, like a body waiting for a name. She packed a bag without telling herself why. Cash, a sweater, a flattened roll of duct tape, box cutter, flashlight that only worked if you swore at it first. 2. The stairwell breathed when she stepped in, pleased. The number hung in the air like the taste of a penny. 2 days left? Lena asked. 2 floors up? 2. What? She hated pleading with architecture. She hated that she'd started counting along. The call came from inside her apartment even though she had no phone. 1 ring, like a courtesy, and then a second that vibrated the glasses in the cupboard. She followed it to the kitchen. The capped jack winked. She pressed her finger to the metal and felt a pulse. The stairwell hummed, the metal string of it thrumming under the storm. She understood all at once what the system wanted, a connection. Not to her exactly, but through her. The postcards were proof of roots. The changing numbers were proof of state. The footsteps above the roof were a line seeking a receiver. She went back out, bag slung crossbody like she was leaving a party in a hurry. The building's front door breathed rain. Neighbors moved inside their rectangles, faces flickering behind curtains. If I go, she told the stairwell, will you stop? A gust pressed her forward. She put her palm to the rail. A memory not hers unfolded like paper in water. A woman on these stairs in 1975, a handset tucked under her jaw as she carried laundry, a laugh, a sudden slip, a breath strangled down to 0. No scream. Only the call, live on the line, the operator saying hello, hello, while the building pretended to be a person. 2, the stairwell repeated, and Lena felt the number settle into her chest like an anchor. It wasn't a countdown to doom, it was a handshake protocol. Step 1 had been the building deciding to speak. Step 2 was her deciding to listen. Thunder tore the roof in half. Somewhere above, the pacing stopped. Night cracked open. The stairwell dimmed to a tunnel. Lena climbed with the flashlight off because the dark belonged to the place, and she wanted permission. The steps flexed under her weight. At the top landing, where the roof should have been, space folded. There was a door she had never seen. Not a fancy door, just painted over too many times, its knob scarred like a thumbnail chewed to the quick. A brass one shone on it, newly polished. "1," the stairwell said, and the word was a key turning. The knob was cold. When it opened, the city sound vanished. She didn't step into a room. She stepped into a connection. A narrow chamber of cross-hatched wires and bakelite panels, and the ghost glow of vacuum tubes that didn't glow. The air smelled like warm dust and lightning. At the center, a switchboard waited, its cords braided like hair, its jacks asking questions. A single light winked on the board, the old-fashioned kind with a jewel lens. It pulsed, patient. Lena understood. Answer, and the counting stops. Someone had slipped on these stairs, once. Someone had called and never hung up. The building had learned to keep the line open no matter how many owners, coats of paint, years of forgetting. She plugged a cord into the lit jack. "Operator," the stairwell said in her bones. "Hello," Lena whispered, and heard herself at 2 ages at once, the woman she was, and the child who used to pick up the phone to hear her grandmother say her name like a spell. "Who am I speaking to?" The voice that came back was not a ghost's wail but a relief so human it hurt. "I've been waiting," it said, not a name, not a demand. Just a truth laid gently on the floor between them. The building relaxed. The hairline cracks in the plaster eased, like tension leaving a jaw. Somewhere far below, the exit sign stopped buzzing. The storm gentled to a hush against windows. The stairwell did not say 0. It didn't need to. It had made the connection it had counted toward. It had taught itself not to lose anyone again. Lena stood in the hum, the cord weighted in her hand, a second light coming alive on the board as if other calls, old and new, were finally being routed to where they belonged. "I'll keep answering," she said, "as long as you keep the line." "Deal," said the place she lived in, and for the first time since she'd moved in, the building sounded like home. She left the door open on her way back down. And in the days that followed, the neighbors stopped saying, "Did you hear that?" with fear, and started saying it with curious smiles. Someone hung a plant on the landing. Someone else polished the brass numbers until they gleamed. The stairwell never counted again. It didn't need to.